I want to talk about imposter syndrome as a software engineer. This is not something that's uncommon amongst software engineers. Despite how many years experience that you have, you are always going to feel this in some way or another. For me, I've been working for like 6 years now, I think, and I still feel imposter syndrome. I think it's just changed forms a little bit compared to when I just started, like my first day, because I felt imposter syndrome like a ton my first year, pretty much. And I still feel it 6 years now later, but I think it's just switched from like being super worried about uh, syntax and like real language specific things to more of system decision making, system design, being familiar with cloud services, and being able to suggest solutions to legitimate problems. So I think that when you start out, at least for me, my imposter syndrome was more focused around just like the raw coding aspect of it and really nothing else. I remember when I started the first day, as a software engineer, and I remember just being like, I remember just being super paranoid about like remembering all like the nuances of C sharp and trying to memorize syntax and being like real obsessive about how other people were coding at the company and trying to adapt my programming style to fit theirs to kind of to make it so I could assimilate into the culture there. So that was pretty stressful because before that, obviously it's just internships, school, personal projects, but it wasn't a lot of like there was never a lot of outside opinion about my code, and that was the first time that people were looking at my code when I put my first pull request out there. And that was a really scary moment because that really solidified for me that I am starting this job. Like, this is what I do for a living, this is what I depend on. And when I got my first feedback about the pull request, I was real nervous about it because that's when imposter syndrome seemed to sneak up the most. And that's what, at least for me, that's when I felt it the strongest. Um, I don't think that I feel that imposter syndrome that way about pull requests anymore, largely just because I don't care as much about like all the same things about code that I used to. Because now I understand that syntax is not really the main thing as you kind of progress in your career. I don't really care that I know like the ins and outs of the C sharp language to a degree that I can change particular patterns or code a different way if it really doesn't affect the overall system. That might just be me shifting interests more into system design, but honestly I think that my imposter syndrome was so strong there, and it was so directly related to just syntax and coding for a while, that maybe I just got used to it. That could be why it's shifted now to more of system design. Um, but I think when you start out, you are really, I think you're going to feel like you need to know or be an expert in one language and like need to know all the obscure language specific things. So, like in C sharp, you can stress over understanding like the func keyword, generics. Trying to think of like uh, all like the different ways you can do null checks, things like that. Things like that can be really stressful because there's so many variations to all those concepts, and there's so many different implementations of those things within C sharp, within the C sharp language, and they keep being updated and added to with every C sharp version. So like it's easy to stress about that, and it's easy to feel like you're inadequate because you don't know this like shortcut, or like a shortcut key, or like a shorthand way to do the same thing that you know how to do a longhand way, or the long form way. um, so it's easy to feel that way in that context. But I think honestly, after enough time, I just kind of stopped caring about that because it doesn't matter. Like, to be honest, it just kind of was like a nice to have thing that you just pick up as you're doing it. So for me, imposter syndrome has remained, but it's moved from that focus over to more system design and problem solving. Because a common problem in software engineering that you're going to have to deal with is you're going to have to figure out how to make systems how to make systems handle a lot of data going through the system and not have it be bogged down. Whether that's to alleviate whether you're trying to minimize lag on the front end, whether you're trying to make your system more resilient in the event of, let's say, some kind of server outage or your app runs out of memory or something along the lines of that. Those things are going to be just common. Those you're going to run into those problems at some point in time in your career. But the fix isn't straightforward in every system because every system is designed in a different way. One system might have an inherent bottleneck in terms of how it's fetching the data from the database. Another system might have a bottleneck in the form that it's waiting on an API that's really slow. Another system might rely heavily on some form of queues like RabbitMQ. These things are common, and you're going to have to figure out how to understand the problem and how to know enough about all those technologies to propose a solution that helps fix, I shouldn't say fix, helps alleviate the problem. So that's the kind of thinking that I think is just developed over time. And that's what I'm trying to get better at. And partially why I'm doing YouTube is just so I can talk about these things more and just get myself thinking about it. But that's currently where my imposter syndrome really is around that whole system design area, which is why I did the Rust and Engine project, is so I could explore more of those kind of technologies and make a system that I could prove to myself could handle a very, very high throughput of data with no lag or interruption. That I would say making this project has certainly helped with my imposter syndrome, but every once in a while, I'll get in, to work online, and something will happen or something to an app or a system that makes me think that I don't know what I'm doing. And that's always going to happen. There's always going to be some problem that you've never seen that, to be honest, is going to make you feel like you are inadequate, which is not true. It's just that the problem that you're seeing is new, and sometimes it's like you can kind of get into a routine of solving problems, meaning like sometimes the problems remain the same largely, but they just kind of change detail. So you get used to solving the same type of problem, but so then when a new problem comes on, your mind, tries to resort to how to fix it historically, but that might not be the case with this new problem. So I think that there's no magic number as to when imposter syndrome is going to stop or is going to you're not going to feel it. There's no year that's going to happen. I think it's always going to persist throughout your career, but you have to identify where it's happening and try to study and learn so that you don't feel that way as much. And then just be on the lookout for where you think it's moving to. So my interests have I think largely have gone from very language specific things. Like for a while, I talked about, I really stressed on learning C# as well as I could have, and just doing every tutorial possible and doing all the quizzes and everything like that, just to learn all the language specific stuff. But what I was realizing is that you can really easily get stuck in tutorials and then come away from those, but not really learn because you never made anything with that. So as I've kind of moved from that spot to now just trying to think more holistically about systems, I think that that's where most of my learning has come into play, just moving away from one specific language to thinking about systems. And I think that that shift, or that attempt to shift my thinking, has helped my imposter syndrome a little bit. Um, so I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't know what where you all experience this the most. Because honestly, I would argue that everybody feels this way in software engineering, simply because all the technologies change so rapidly. And this is a pretty relatively newer career to go into in the form that it is now, and especially cloud technologies, very new. And all these like languages that were modern languages we're using are pretty new, all things considered. So we're still finding bugs. We're still finding there's still open issues that have to be solved, particularly in the realm of, how do we synchronize databases and acquire locks? And there's just a lot of remaining open problems that all kind of add to the fact that you can't be an expert on everything. You're not gonna know everything that there is to know, and it's okay to feel like you don't know something, and it's okay to feel like it's okay to feel it's okay to feel imposter syndrome, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Because it's not going to go away, but you just have to learn how to think about it, and how to not let it take ownership of you in this career. So I'll see you next one.